Hey, welcome everybody to our discussion with Dave McComb, and he's the founder of Semantic Arts, and Mark Wallace, the president and one of our long-standing ontologists at Semantic Arts, to really celebrate our 25th anniversary of existence. So the agenda, real quickly, is to cover a lot of ground about our evolution as an organization, some of the lessons that we've learned in implementation of data-centric principles. And lastly, which may be most interesting for those, is to really look at the future of information and knowledge management. And it's really a changing environment, as many of you know, around AI, LLM, and how that's influencing the world that we exist in today. And hopefully you'll come away with more understanding of semantic arts, and where does semantic arts really kind of fit into this broader data equation. And really, it's always a pleasure to get together with those that follow us as part of our data-centric community. And those that are in attendance, they may be relatively new to those concepts, but those challenges of how we're able to connect the meaning of data and making faster and better decisions are of a primary concern for a lot of those. So thank you for attending. That really sets the stage. Oh, one last thing I wanted to mention is that we're open to having questions captured. And Joaquin, maybe you can tell those in attendance how to do that, because we've set aside at least 20-25 minutes or so for some Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. At any moment, feel free to asynchronously add your question in the chat, and we'll moderate as we find gaps in the dialogue to insert it at a relevant time frame. But all that being said, yes, we have 20 minutes allocated at the end of the conversation to just have open Q&A. So anything you might be wondering, we'll address at that time. But for now, we have a few questions that we have lined up. And I think one of the first that we have to address, given this is the 25th anniversary, is what has been the source of longevity for this organization? What is it in the cultural DNA that's kind of kept us alive for these last 2 decades and a half?
Yeah. Somebody once said of some scientist, Alfred Lord Whitehead, whatever his name was, one of those guys, what the secret of his success was. And he says, in terms of the animal kingdom, I've gone for 70 years without being eaten and rarely went long without eating. So, I think the secret to longevity is to not go out of business. It's pretty profound, huh?
Yeah.
But, weirdly, why do companies go out of business? Why do tech companies go out of business? And they sort of go out for one of two reasons, neither of which we've succumbed to. Either they run out of money, run out of runway, don't get the next funding round, whatever. You run out of cash and it's game over. Or that's if you're unsuccessful. If you're successful, you get acquired and you're gone. That's everybody's dream. So we've now set ourselves up. I'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but we've set ourselves up so we can't be acquired. So we're at least a little bit immortal on that side. On the other side, running out of money, well, that's always a challenge, but we don't have a lot of fixed expenses. So unless we screw things up, and I used to belong to a group called Vistage, and I may talk about them a little bit later, about CEOs that are sort of your peers or sort of your informal outside board. And now I belong to something similar called the Alternative Board, a bunch of people in different industries trying to keep you honest. And one of them just once said, the secret of business is keeping your expenses in line with your revenue. I think as long as you do that, you don't go out of business. It's not very profound, but I don't know. Mark, maybe you know something about our DNA, that why we've survived. That's my take.
I had a thought about it. One of the things I think is that if you really look at, kind of the semantic graph technology, which came out, like RDF was 1999, so it predates Semantic Arts by a year, I guess, and then OWL by 2004. I think part of it is that we recognize, and not just us, but when we looked at it, once you get to know that way of modeling, you almost think this makes more sense than anything else. So I think in some ways we found something that has taken a long time. If you look at the Gartner cycles and the hype curve and the trough of disillusionment, but I think we saw something that at its core actually made a ton of sense, and we kind of stuck with it. And like you said, we've been able to, we were able to keep the lights on and lean times, et cetera. But I think, it's a good approach to data, and I think that's part of why it's stuck around so long. It's stuck around long enough now. I think it's really getting a lot more uptake, especially with, say, backing LLMs and stuff like that. I think that's going to be its new, that's where it's going to suddenly get a lot of interest again. So I just think it's a good technology, and it's going to stand the test of time, and people are finally figuring that out.
One of the other things, and we've been studying this internally lately, we're sort of in a transition to governance by a governance committee, and we're just starting to socialize some ideas around strategy. And one of the more profound things, and again, most profound things are so simple they sound dumb when you say them, but is most companies' strategy is to be the best in X, in some domain. Then it turns out to be a lousy strategy. That ends up being, you go into agreement with the incumbents that are already in whatever space that is, and you try and duke it out in quality and price and all that kind of stuff. And it turns out better strategies are, how can I be different? How can we have a niche that is well defined and different and mostly only occupied by us? And so we say, that's where we want to be. So part of that has been evolving. It's a gradually changing definition, but right now one big part of that we call modular digital transformation. I don't think anybody else is into that. People are either into digital transformation, in which case it's not modular at all. It's big bang, hundreds of millions. Or if you're just doing ontology work and knowledge graphs, maybe you're not doing digital transformation. Maybe you're just doing incremental improvement or projects or whatever. But I think we're in this little space all by ourselves.
Yeah, and Dave, one of the strategies that we've employed, and we've discovered this as a result of skin in our knees and a bit of just learning on the go, is our methodology as to how we go about pulling together this. And it's the think big, start small strategy. I know that I've probably heard it over 100 times, but it is relevant to the lessons that we've learned, and maybe you can share a little bit more about how that became the point of what we've discovered.
Yeah. Mark, you want to take that one? You've been around for the entirety of Think Big, Start Small. When did that actually start? Do you remember?
So I started in 2017, and I think you're right. It felt like right around that time we were starting to coalesce on this idea, because Semantic Arts, again, being around 25 years. I mentioned that the technology was around since then, but the performance of the technology, was not so great in the early years. So in the early parts of Semantic Arts, I know it was mostly develop an ontology for someone, kind of the meaning and the vocabulary, but don't really build a whole lot of data with it. And I think that kind of only went so far. And so after a while, you have to start showing some of that would go on a shelf. I think it was valuable to get agreement on vocabulary, at the C-suite level or whatever. But I think what happened is, as you want to show value and you start to build knowledge graphs, we realized it is a good idea to ground your whole enterprise in a unifying vocabulary and ontology. But, the data-centric vision and the data-centric manifesto preceded me, so that was around before 2017. But the idea of really moving your whole organization to this, I think, it's a great goal. It's really the right thing to do in the long term, but it's a long game. And so the idea was, a lot of people won't invest in a 10-year game or a 5-year game, right? They need some value each quarter. And it's like, so let's show them how this works, at least by, we would try in a short period of time, sometimes only like a 3-month engagement, sometimes that would be a 6-month engagement, to come up with their overall vision of their data, that kind of the vocabulary for their data, but then bring in, let's build a small part of it right now. Let's show you that if the big picture is to do this big picture and get all your domains in, let's try early on to get a small domain in, and essentially your people will kind of see how this works. How does this, having the core upper ontology, what we call a core ontology, work to help you slowly integrate as you go and get value as you go? And I think that gets back to Dave's, the way he's talking about it now is modular digital transformation. You really are transforming, but you're doing it in a modular way, a domain at a time, and showing value a little at a time. And, part of it's just, like you said, Steve, the success has been borne out by, you try different things. We started thinking this way and it seemed to resonate with people. And, so you keep doing it and you may learn a few things here and there, but in general, people want to see, people get it when they see their data in the model and when they get some value from it early on. I think that's why think big, start small, ended up being a great approach. And that's why we keep using it.
Yeah, and you just mentioned some at the beginning of that triggered another neuron about, in the early days, the knowledge graphs weren't all that great. And for a while, we've been living, not exactly a lie, but living something that we couldn't quite 100% own up to, which is this idea that all of the data in your enterprise could conform to a single model. And yet the size of some of these enterprises and how much data there was kind of made that aspirational for sure. But I just recently read a book. I was just leaning over here to see if I could find it. Kind of interesting, called Pattern Breakers. And the interesting observation they make in there, they're claiming that things that really break through and change the world have 5 ingredients, but the first 2 are probably the most important. One is there's an inflection, and then there's an insight. And the inflection is something that changed in the world that made something possible that wasn't otherwise possible. And the insight was, what you make out of that. And for example, and at this point in time, we would think, oh, the inflection is AI, or the inflection is this, and the inflection is that. But a lot of times it's a smaller kind of thing. One of the great examples was, it wasn't until the iPhone 4 that Apple and later others had very precise GPS. So prior to the iPhone 4, so the inflection was, suddenly when you have very precise GPS, business models like Uber can work. You need to be able to get down to a few meters for there. Otherwise, it was too coarse and grainy and didn't really work. So they make a lot of cases out of those kinds of inflections and those kinds of insights. And I'm starting to think that the inflection that perhaps occurred this year, that's going kind of unnoticed, is that we now have RDF Sparkle compliant triple stores capable of hundreds of billions or trillions of triples, and that can be federated. And when suddenly you get to that point, all of a sudden, everything we've been saying for the last several years, now you go, yeah, you should be able to do that. Just a matter of time. Load them up, federate them out. Let's go.
Now, I have a question to extend and build upon this line of thinking. What is the significance of proving value early and often? I mean, this is a sticking point of building within an organization and expanding the data-centric vision. So what's the secret?
Yeah, I think we just said it in a way. I do feel like think big, start small has been our way of proving value early, and sticking with a client. I'm working with a client that I think we've been with for 7 years now. So I'm not going to drop names, but they drank the Kool-Aid, if you will. They saw some value in semantics, and we've incrementally been working with them. We built a core ontology again many years ago that hasn't changed all that much. It was based on Gist, which is the one that we provide out there as open source. And I think they're just seeing that value. Like, they keep getting value like I said, every quarter. Maybe in 2018, maybe they weren't seeing value every quarter, but they built applications over the top of knowledge graphs, well before 2020. And I think it just keeps growing. And by sticking to the notion of a relatively small but broad set of concepts that describes their enterprise, I don't know that there's more than 500 total concepts. So again, some of the stuff Dave said that we believed aspirationally, now we're getting data from clients where we've been for 7-8 years. And you have to be diligent, and you have to stick to your ideals. But I think it's proven itself out that we can provide value early and often, and we keep providing value again every quarter to the people we're working with. I think that helps make us sticky with some clients.
And what's interesting there, there's no lock-in at all. There's no technology lock-in. Everything's RDF. It's all open. It's all portable. There's nothing proprietary. There's nothing that every quarter when we're done, we're done. So there's no obligation for us to keep going. And yet, to kind of answer Joaquin's question, we've tried to arrange things such that every quarter there's some new added value. And as long as there is, why would you stop? Now, where I think this is the longer term play, and I look at some of these landscapes, clients that have thousands of application systems, and I just look at this and I say to myself, how did that come to be? That didn't just happen. Actually, you designed that. You built that intentionally, one app at a time. If you have 10,000 apps, as one of our clients does, because we have an inventory of their apps, so we know how many they have. And if most of them were built in this century, we haven't exactly tested this, but I would guess at least 90%. That means they've added 400 apps a year, one app a day. Every day, a new app. On average, I mean, obviously that's gross averaging. And what we're hoping that we're getting to is first to slow that rate of growth. In fact, if anything, that growth is accelerating in most clients right now between SaaS, which makes it easy to add yet another application data silo, and now with AI and vibe coding. I mean, anybody with a $20 subscription can build a new app, and that's not really going to slow things down. But if one of the things we're starting to see in some of our clients is just the presence of this integrated database is causing them to question, do I need yet another app with copies of this in a different model? Then they're slowing down and slowing down the increasing rate. And then gradually we're starting to see some of our clients looking at functionality that currently is implemented in their legacy system and saying, well, I could implement that same use case right here against the triple store, and I can do them one at a time. I don't have to, it's not like legacy modernization where you have to do everything all at once. You can do a few use cases, and as long if you do the use case in the graph, the feed will no longer come through. That the feed that was coming from the legacy will start to trickle. Maybe there's still a dozen use cases, and maybe there's 7 or 8. And then when you finally get down to the last couple, you just say, screw it, turn it off. And we hope that's the long-term game here. It's going to take a while. It took a while to get into this mess. It's going to take a while to get out of it.
From the perspective of the business, what are some of the capabilities, strategic and tactical capabilities, that are enabled throughout these modular digital transformation efforts?
You want to go, Mark? Well, I think, or do you want me to go while you think?
I need to hear the question again. I'm sorry, Joaquin. It didn't all
Well,
jam in my head. So if you
from the perspective of the organizations, the clients that we provide professional services to, what are the strategic and tactical capabilities that we enable through these modular transformation efforts? So what is the value add for them that we were describing in more concrete ways?
I'll give one little example. It's kind of strategic and tactical all at the same time, but it's this notion of client RFI, where people want to know a client request for information, where due to some of the new regulations about privacy and needing to know who's got your data, they want to ask that question. Where's my data? Who can see it? And I was at a client where they said that is a extremely manual 60-day process. When someone calls on the phone and says, I need to know this, they start, the game of telephone or whatever, they ask, and I know this person and go get this person. And it literally takes like 60 days to go very manually through all this stuff. So I think, as you integrate data, you just start getting more and more. I think of it as a snowball effect. You get more and more snow packed onto the ball until it gets big enough. So what they kind of discovered was, because we were modeling systems and people's entitlements to systems and things like that, they said, if we just bring in client data, the one thing that we're missing, or if we can tie a client to the systems their data is in, then we can probably answer that question, now they'll say a week, like a 5-minute query. Like once you get enough data in, then you suddenly have the ability to answer questions that span, many data sources. And again, often data sources that were not integrated. So just the value of integrating the data from all these different systems. And as Dave says, kind of in a modular, safe way. A lot of times we're not replacing the systems. In fact, rarely are we replacing the systems up front. We're just getting their data, but normalizing it and tying it together. So to me, that's been a huge kind of, strategically and tactically, they can get that question answered now really fast. But strategically, I think it helps them realize, if this worked almost out of serendipity. Like we didn't know we'd have this ability, but we were 90% there, and we realized, hey, if we add one more bit of data into this knowledge graph, we're going to actually be able to cut something from 60 days to about 6 minutes. And I think that's, like I said, there's a strategic aspect of that, as well as the tactical use case that they were able to solve. Hope that's.
And of course, the other big one that sounds strategic, but really it's tactical right now, because AI is mostly tactical this year. People talk about it being strategic, but it's really incredibly reactionary. But that said, getting all of your key data in one place, harmonized and curated in a single view of truth, is an incredible accelerator for LLMs. I was at the Knowledge Management and AI conference in the spring, and the head of Microsoft, who ran their internal Copilot on SharePoint initiative, said, obviously you can run Copilot over your SharePoint installed site and stuff, but if you have as much data as Microsoft does in SharePoint, you have multiple versions of the same information, or even the same concept, or the same everything. And of course, an LLM is already prone to hallucinate. You give them multiple arbitrarily different versions of the same thing, and they go crazy. This guy's great line was that ambiguity is Gen AI's kryptonite. So I think the strategic thing to do is, if you can get rid of ambiguity, and if you can, employ some techniques like GraphRag. Everybody has now proven that GraphRag, using the graph as your augmentation instead of just prompt engineering, will, improve your F1 scores fantastically. So, I think that's a tactical or strategic or whichever way you want to look at it. Huge advantage. It's big this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of that is starting to converge, as you mentioned. And I know that, I mean, our methodology has been in place for quite some time, and now technology has caught up to that. Dave or Mark, maybe you can talk a little bit more. I mean, we had some of those particular vendors and leaders at our DCA forum this past summer, but they talk about the scalability and how these knowledge graph enterprise level concepts are not now scalable. And Dave, maybe you can talk to some of that previous limitation that we no longer see as that being the situation any longer.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I was saying a little bit earlier. We had 3 different vendors show up to the DCAF this year, all of whom demonstrating at least hundreds of billions. In one case, trillions, although they can't speak about it now. So, but I think we got a lot of headroom that we will be happy to use in the future.
Awesome.
All right. Let's get a little bit technical, because I know there's a lot of folk here that are wanting to get some questions answered around those details. So how are we developing accelerators as a mean to deliver more value faster and build on our expertise? We've talked a little bit about the longevity DNA and kind of finding ways of adding more value in shorter periods of time. So what are we doing to continue to evolve?
Yeah, there's two paths we're on right now, and they're kind of converging. One, as a lot of people know, we developed GIST in 2007. So that was even before we were doing much implementation, just the observation that, yeah, there's a lot of common themes in enterprise data modeling. And while, there's a lot of good thinking in things like BFO, it was just too hard to try and explain those things to our clients. So invented GIST. What is interesting about GIST is how it has evolved. We've used it on pretty much every project we've done, so at least 100 projects since then. And we have a GIST development group that is shepherding this, and we're taking their feedback, and we talk about it literally every week. What worked, what didn't work, should we change this? What are the new trends in ontology, et cetera, et cetera. And so GIST is evolving and stabilizing and becoming a good starting point. But what we find, almost every client, we extend GIST. So now we have a client-specific version of GIST, but you do 2 projects in the same industry, and pretty soon anything that's kind of common becomes sort of a starter point for an industry extension of this. And none of those have gone public. Well, I guess one of them leaked out of the lab, but that's okay. But we got 3 or 4 initiatives that are now kind of very useful for jumpstarting things. We've got one initiative in pharma from our work with life sciences companies. We got an initiative in cyber. We've done several things with several different people in different aspects of cyber. We've got something we call GIST computing, because we've been working with hardware and software and metadata and various other things, and that's all congealing around one. And our financial services stuff is congealing in sort of 2 areas. One is just the whole idea, know your customer 360, fraud, et cetera. And then there's the more general, actually I didn't mention, I just spent this, I don't know how I forgot about this, but I just spent the whole weekend on the final editing of my next book, which is about accounting. We've got accounting and professional services, but we've also got accounting plus financial services. We got to kind of get those knitted together. But so that's one aspect of accelerators. And the other is we've been in the back office building out a platform, a model-driven platform that can help our clients rapidly, build out a lot of the use cases natively very low and in many cases no code. And we're starting to try and snap those two things together, the accelerator and a low code platform to deliver something. So I assume that's what you were talking about. I don't know.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
And there's actually a tiny bit, it's not exactly in the same category as those accelerators, but something else we've done recently has done a mapping between GIST and the BFO, the basic formal ontology, which a lot of organizations, maybe especially those more on the governmental side, might be required to use what we call BFO. It's an ontology that is a little more on the philosophical side. It can be hard for business people and regular people sometimes to know how to utilize it. And GIST is kind of, I'd say, more down to earth in terms of its top level classes, and people tend to resonate with it more quickly. So the idea of this linkage or this bridge, it would allow someone to start using GIST, which again is probably a lot easier to jumpstart into, and kind of get the BFO mappings for free. So for people that either want to query against those BFO classes or just want to be able to check a box that says, yes, I am also compliant with BFO, that's another, it kind of accelerates that use case for people.
Right. And Mark and I just got back from Sicily, where we sat in on the International Symposium of Applied Ontology, had some great presentations about UFO, the Unified or Universal, whatever the U stands for, unidentified flying object, something like that. But anyway, we got a few people at Semantic Arts who are going to take on, what will it take to create a UFO version of GIST. That one's not motivated by the fact that people are obligated to use UFO, because as far as we know, no one is. But it's got some very interesting. It's almost like a meta ontology where you take all your classes and assign them to their stereotypes, and then use that to look for anti-patterns in your design. And I'm kind of excited to see what we find in GIST, but I think in particular we will find probably more anti-patterns where we've extended GIST, because fewer eyeballs on it. It's easy to do something expedient. So I think that'd be a pretty interesting little project.
Yeah, we've spoke a little bit and touched on LLMs and knowledge graphs, and on that same technical theme of questions. I mean, based on what we've seen here, what do you both, Mark and Dave, feel is necessary for these businesses that are trying to enable these particular capabilities, and how do they ensure that they're trustworthy and they have the reliability? Just on some of our practices, how do you see that moving forward?
I mean, I can take a cut at it. Dave kind of already mentioned the idea of graph RAG. I'm guessing many, if not most of you, may have heard of that. If not, RAG means retrieval augmented generation. And so when a language model, is taking language in, it's trying to figure out something, quite honestly, mostly statistical, very likely language to spit back out. This is why they can hallucinate, right? Because very highly probable language may still not be true. And the idea of RAG is when you're trying to retrieve and augment your information so that you can write it as text back out to a user, you want to augment it. You want to check it. And the idea is you can check the information against a knowledge graph that is, more 100% vetted knowledge, and you're not just kind of guessing. So the idea of that using graph RAG, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, there's certain things, if you want to know how should I rewrite my resume, there's no one right way to do that. So a bunch of good words put together, that's all you were asking for, and you might tweak them a little bit. If you want to know exactly what your profit and loss was in this quarter of this month, you better hope it's not going to make a probable bunch of text that's kind of close, but not the real, actuals, or you need to give your auditor or something. So I think that's great for checking it. And then I think what I'm seeing is going beyond checking it and actually having the LLMs, understand the question on the way in, but actually have almost a strategy picker module in there that then's going to say, what's the best way to get this answer? It may not be, if it's how to write my resume, it might still be let the LLM generate the output. But if it's something like, what's the weather going to be in Colorado 2 days from now? Again, you don't want statistical text. You want to go hit a weather service and tell it Colorado and get the actual best answer for the weather prediction. And if you want to get something like your financial statements or anything else that you might have in your knowledge graph, the knowledge graph would be one of the services at the disposal of the AI engine to go get answers. And the reason I think that's so good, and I think the reason why, it's not just augmented generation, but it may be one of the best knowledge sources, is that a knowledge graph by definition is contextual, more than, say, a database with tables or a bunch of, text. The idea that items are linked to items are linked to items, so you can get these neighborhoods. And so much more of the context is deterministic, and it's right there, a hop or two away. And then getting a little more technical, as Dave mentioned, if you're using a semantic graph, you can actually infer some things. And if you turn reasoning on, which you don't always do, but again, the tools are getting better all the time, then essentially you're even spelling out the inferences to the AI engine that's trying to query. So in other words, it doesn't have to figure out, well, to get this answer, you got to hop these 4 hops. If there's some inference that can happen that makes that a 1 hop, the LLM doesn't know the difference. It's just looking for context. It finds easy context on things that were inferred. So I hope that's not like too technical, but to me, that's where I think the synergy of LLMs and semantic knowledge graphs is going to be really important.
The other thing that just sort of happens as you do these projects, and it's funny, if you have thousands of systems and, we go in and we stand up a knowledge graph, and where should we get this from? People say, oh, this is a good source for that. And maybe you get some data out of a data warehouse because, gee, that's already collapsed and combined. And at least you only have one version of whatever it was you went to go get. I'm writing a proposal right now for Department of Education. So my example from over the weekend is about students and districts and funding and all that. Anyhow, if you find, here's one place where we get student counts, then you go, and at least you don't have 4 or 5, and each of them slightly different. You say, okay, this, but then after a while, you start talking to people and saying, well, wait a minute, we're getting a slight discrepancy here. Why is that? Oh, well, this system does that. Oh, well, if you go further upstream, where's the actual source of truth? Oh, okay, well, let's just skip over that warehouse that was accumulating and actually providing something else and give me the more source. But now, instead of having 2 versions, we're really trying to collapse on, one version or the best version of each little sub domain. And it gradually, is creating, I guess, the greatest hits version in your knowledge graph. It's the best place to turn your LLM loose.
I think in some way also in the beginning of the conversation or throughout the conversation, you've addressed these concepts of disambiguation of commonly recurring terminology that may have different meaning according to where you are in the organization. What does customer mean? Well, it means different things to marketing, to sales, to customer success. So, I guess that's one way to ground that. We do have a question coming in from Siva. Siva, do you want to?
Yeah. Good
Siva,
morning.
how are you?
Good. How are you, Dave?
Good.
Hey,
This is
Siva.
old time. What do you call it?
I know.
Yeah.
I think, but also very exciting times, Dave. Thanks. I have multiple comments. I don't know. I don't want to steal your show, but one thing I want to at least respond to is that I have been researching about aligning generative AI to engineering use cases. As you know, I'm from Siemens. My focus is on engineering. as you know, our software is used to design aircraft, so life and death type of nuclear power plant. So we know
Mhm.
what safety means. Having said that, I know LLMs are probabilistic, not deterministic. So I took upon myself, it is about, we know what LLM's strengths and weaknesses are. It is all about engineering around that strengths and weaknesses. And in that process, I think most of our software, billions of dollars of our software, we are trying to convert them as the tools that LLMs can use. So rather than only
Mhm.
using their generative power, they're not generating dimensions of a turbine blade or anything like that, but they're using our software to use it. So I think we want to. It is all about as engineers, how do we engineer these agentic? For example, I focused a lot on the developing of or architecting agents. There it is all about how do we engineer agents such that they take advantage of the LLMs inferencing whatever knowledge it has, how they can make use of all the existing software in the world as tools. That way, still they get the deterministic capabilities from those existing software. Then use also some of your knowledge graphs and all, also the additional augmentation of their knowledge for the domain specific knowledge, and obviously finally use the natural language to instruct them how to behave. So it is all about
Mhm.
composing all these things, and also when you're talking about multi-agent systems, even much more complex, how do they orchestrate and all. So I think I'm not going to. I mean, there are a lot of people poo-pooing about the LLM's capabilities, but it is all about. It's just another tool in the bigger scheme of
Right.
problem solving. We have to engineer solutions around those weaknesses and also leverage their capabilities. I just want to make
Yeah.
that observation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I
So
was trying to get at. Yeah, the idea that there's different strategies, right, on what the LLM can use, and like you said, making
Correct.
all these different tools available as part of how it can choose to get an answer.
Correct.
I think is yep.
Yeah. Use of so basically I focus more on teaching LLMs how to use these tools rather than
Mhm.
replacing the
Yep,
existing software, right?
Yep.
So
exactly.
yeah, if you let me know if you have time for my next question, but it's not urgent.
we,
Yeah,
we have a couple questions lined up, but then afterwards we'll open up for
yeah,
Yeah.
open
sure.
Q&A.
Yeah,
But this was perfectly in line with asking how to enable agents in the infrastructure and the ecosystem. All organizations are trying to build these interfaces, whether it's GraphRag or agentic or any variation of that. So are there any other trends that you might be seeing, within our clients that you think are worth mentioning, and some of the implications of knowledge graphs alongside those trends?
Here's a funny one that just came up recently. This was internal, but it's gonna apply to our clients as well. And it's where AI is giving us a capability where I wasn't really counting on it. And here's the scenario. So if you're trying to become completely data centric, as we suppose, even a little company like ours, we have over a dozen systems. We have a CRM system, and an accounting system, and our people travel and they fill in expense reports. So they have Expensify. Now it doesn't cost that much, and it's not that bad. But it is bad actually. There's first you send it to JT, and then he puts it in a spreadsheet, and then we have to send it to our payroll, and blah blah blah. It's just a bunch of stuff. And you say to yourself, be kind of nice if we just replace that with one capability that was completely integrated. You think to yourself, wow, to replace expensive, that would cost $1 million. They'd probably put $1 million into that thing. Well, one of our guys, Brett, just recently went out and got a few LLM modules and took some pictures of receipts and turned it into data and sent it on in. And you go, wait a minute. I think this is the future. I think people are going to quit saying, oh, let's go buy another app and say, if I need the capability to capture a receipt, just go do that and add it to the graph and move on. So I don't know. I think we're going to start seeing that a lot, that using it as a replacement for previously hard to create functionality.
You said functionality, Dave. I think that's a key word. A lot of what I think drives the core idea behind a lot of tech acquisition today in companies is based on the idea of a business function that needs to be realized in some way. And so we buy software off the shelf. As some of the commentators noted, there's been a pushback against build now for the last, I don't know what it is, decade and a half or something. But essentially companies are looking to buy a function, and they're treating the data essentially as a second-class citizen. They understand that there's going to be a silo that comes to that, but it's a lesser problem than solving the business function problem. And I think, one of the potential areas where we could go, where graph thinking could go, is to get away from this idea of seeing the business as a set of functions, but rather as a set of core objects, core data objects, yes, but really it's deeper than that. But those things that get slowly mutated over time, as opposed to individual functions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
so Joaquin, do you want to take questions now? Michael's Sullivan's got his hand up.
We have one more thing. Sorry, Michael,
Okay.
I'm going to have you hold your hand one more time, or you'll be top of the heap. The AI winter, what's coming up? What should you store in your fridge? Should you bundle up? What do we expect?
Yep, it's coming. We'll be here on January 13th, 2026. I just hallucinated that. I made that up. I think we are going to have AI winter. But it's not going to be bad. It's not like AI is going to go away. It's going to be like, all the previous AI winters, as well as the .com blowout. When .com exploded, it wasn't the end of the internet. It wasn't the end of e-commerce. It wasn't the end of anything. It was just the end of a bunch of investors getting washed out. And we're certainly going to see that in AI, I think, within the year. I think there is so much money and so many business models that don't make economic sense. People selling something for $20 a month that costs them close to $2,000 a month to satisfy, the whole cost of acquiring, cost of satisfying, negative lifetime value of a customer. You can only build that for so long before somebody says, well, wait a minute, where's all the benefit? And add to that, McKinsey's recent study that 95% of internal Gen AI projects failed to deliver a business benefit. Sooner or later, they're going to stop doing that or pause until we sort all this out. And just like Gartner always says, after the trough of disillusionment, there's a plateau of productivity. You wash out all that crap and you find out what actually worked, and then let's double down on that. So that's my prediction. Might be January, might be February, I don't know, but
yeah, ditto. There was the two reports. The one MIT Media Lab was 95% son of value, and another interesting one that just came out of METR.org said that because the one thing people thought would be the most useful might be programming, and they have a report that says when developers are allowed to use AI tools, they take 19% longer to complete issues. So again, I'm with you. It's going to get better. People are going to figure out how to use it. There'll be a trough of disillusionment, though, probably in the next 6 to 12 months. And, just like, the semantic technology went through that a long time back, right, Dave? And we're the guys who just sat there and stuck with it under us and our clients, and they've been getting value out of it ever since. So, but I'm guessing, there'll be a bit of a crash, and then good stuff will come out of it.
Yeah, just a few other things, and then I'll have to pass it over to Joaquin again to get some of those Q&As out to Dave and Mark. But you might have been aware that we have our Enterprise Data Transformation Symposium that's coming up February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. That one's 100% virtual. We also are doing the forum again in the summertime. I think those dates are aligned, but we'll get a link out to you for any of the practitioners that would like to be attending that. The agenda is still in formation. And Joaquin, you had one last item, and then we can start the Q&A.
Yes, let me just piggyback off of what you're saying on the Enterprise Data Transformation Symposium. If you are interested in being a speaker, reach out to us. We're looking for business use cases that prove the value of knowledge graphs, data-centric architecture. So we'd love to have you present. And I want to pass the mic over to Dave and Mark to tell us a little bit about this little special announcement on what we're bringing into the future of the beyond the 25 years. Do you want to talk a little bit about the community, Dave? And Mark?
The community, or let's see. Well, I'm not sure where I was going to go with this, but I did allude earlier about how hopefully semantic arts will never die. It's always tempting when you get old, like I am, to say, well, I had a nice run. Why don't I just sell my company? I'll take all the money and go play golf. First place, I'm a terrible golf player, and I would get incredibly bored of that. But and more importantly, I decided I went through that process, decided I just didn't want to do that. So this year we're in the process. There's a lot of legal crap. This was taking me far longer than I wanted it to, but of moving the ownership of Semantic Arts into a trust, but the management of it to the employees. So, in general, I'm a fan of the idea of employee-owned organizations, ESOPs and the like, but there's the poster child for them was here in Fort Collins, New Belgium, the people who make Fat Tire beer. They were one of the early and biggest employee-owned companies, and they just sold out to Kirin, or a subsidiary of Kirin, the Japanese beer maker. And I'm pretty sure that the owners who turned the company over to the employees afterwards said, selling to Kirin? I mean, we could have done that. We didn't have to give it to the employees in order to have that kind of a transaction. And so I'm setting up Semantic Arts so it can be employee governed, but there's no possibility of being sold. It can't be sold. So, and hopefully they govern it well and it continues on more or less forever, but who knows? I'll be dead by then, I hope. Well, I don't hope I'm dead, but sooner or later, I hope it does survive me. So that's not quite the community, but what did you have in mind there, Joaquin? Was that did I answer the right question, or was that I answering a wrong question?
No, I think that was a completely different question that I didn't ask. But we are launching a community for data transformation.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about that one?
Yeah. We're kind of taking a bunch of things that we sort of scattershotted previously and trying to unify them. So there's a whole bunch of, we've got the data-centric manifesto out there. We've had this symposium going for several years. We've had the data-centric architecture going for 7 years. We've had the GIST council going for many years. But nothing that stitched that all together and made it feel like it was a whole. So McComb is taking on the job of sort of managing that as a community. So anybody who wants to, be involved in this movement and help move it along, or learn, or do whatever it is you want to do. I mean, this is the mechanism for that. We're all trying to learn from each other and raise the whole capability, if you will, for the whole industry. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Joaquin? Did I miss anything when I?
Just to add a little bit, in the spirit of that employee govern and employee operations, it's a team effort. JT, Rebecca, everybody that's working in just like we're all going to participate in developing this community, and we hope that people can lean on each other for support and other resources. We're going to be hosting webinars, panel discussions. We're going to continue our series, and we're also going to host some roundtables. So I'm just going to post the link in the chat. If you want to register to be the first to know and to be signed up for the community, it's free to join. We are going to have a little bit of a hand selection just to make sure that we keep the quality of the participants high and that you meet with other practitioners. We want to build this community. I think the efforts of the Enterprise Data Transformation Symposium, the Data-Centric Architecture Forum, and all these other things have led to this moment. So we hope that we can just co-create this shared living space and build with each other. That's as far as it goes. So with that, I think you answered the first question that Jonathan asked at the beginning of the session, Dave. And we had some really nice comments. Michael, would you like to ask your question since you've been holding your hand for a very long time?
Oh, my arm is sore. Oh my gosh. Hello. Yeah, there you go. Just actually two things. One is a comment. I was a consultant in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the 80s and the early 90s. Quite a few of my customers were in the first round of artificial intelligence. A thing that I never hear people discuss, although they kind of hint at it, is that people were throwing money at AI back then. And then there was, mysteriously, there was this AI winter, but it's not mysterious if you were on the ground. What people were doing is they said, oh my God, there's this other thing I got to get on. And they took their money and they threw it at that. And that other thing was the web. And the years, it happened over a 2-year period. It just boom, just the money dried up. So I don't think anything's going to happen until something else comes along that people are going to throw money at. And if that takes a year or two from now or 3, people are going to continue to throw money at it because everyone else is throwing money at it, and they hope to be the guy that that hits the home run. So and that's the modern way of investing now. You do 100 investments and one hits shoots the moon and the other 99 fail, and you make much more money. It's the old ways of investing just don't work anymore. Anyway, that's just me going off. A pattern. So Oracle was late to the game. Very comfortable in there. We had our database and we had our applications and ERP making lots of money, blah blah blah. And so they weren't. They were kind of late to the game to kind of understand what we are, the whole data centricity thing. And good for Larry to finally push us in a direction that makes total sense. And it's this notion that polyglot is here to stay. So many of our customers now are using the Oracle database to just do in one database, right? You got RDF, you got property graph, you got JSON, you got geospatial, you got relational, you got vector. In our application, we're using all of those. We're
Hmm.
using the vector database that's built in. We're using the JSON database that's built in. We're using the property graph that's built in. We're using that because for things like data analytics and constraining the hops, which are super efficient in property graph. We're using RDF for semantics. We're using geospatial, and this whole idea of polyglot and put the data in the form it wants to be is really, I think, is we're starting to see traction on at the Oracle side, and we're seeing it in other graph databases too, but not to the extent that I suppose Oracle is, simply because Oracle is so much bigger. So I mean, that is definitely a pattern. And
are you, Michael? Are you sharing meaning across the polygons? So like, is the JSON really JSON LD, and is the
no, we support both. Right? We use JSON when we want to define very specific closed world shapes. Everything from how to define a relational data table or something like that, right? We also use JSON LD basically as the serialization of RDF, simply because it's so much faster. And then we use property graph to make things like graph analytics and between these semantic nodes. So everything's backed by semantics. But that doesn't mean we're querying it, right? So we're doing it indirectly. Yeah, I mean, for AI, what we're seeing is the reduction of hallucinations tremendously because everything is domain specific. So all the ontologies are very, very, very domain specific. And so if you hop around and grab bits and pieces of SCA's labels and put them together, suddenly your LLMs aren't hallucinating anymore. And that's what we've noticed. So it's exciting times. I'm not sure AI is going away anytime soon, unless something comes up where people are going to start throwing money at it. I think that's what caused the first AI winter. That's what will cause the second AI winter.
Quantum's still too far away, so it's not quantum.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know what it is that people are going to throw money at, but I think that'll be the thing. And until then, as far as I can tell, people are going to continue to throw money at it, and it doesn't seem. I don't see it happening in January or February, in spite of your hallucinations. I can see it more on the order of 2 or 3 years, even. Where it gets even crazier, right? I mean, people are just so desperate for return on investments and stuff. So who knows? Whatever. Anyway, that polyglot thing is a big, for me. I think that's a huge deal.
That is cool.
And polyglot backed by semantics. I mean, that's the key, right? That's the key.
Exactly. That's where I was going with this. And last time we spoke, you were going to have a surprise announcement that Oracle's energy sector, or whatever it was, is sitting on top of GIST. You going to tease us any more with any of that?
Oh, we now have a SKU. Our product has a SKU. We're in what is known as limited availability LA. We will be in GA soon, and at that point, we certainly will be happy to do about it. But absolutely, everything is back. Everything in our polyglot solution is backed by semantics, and the semantics are backed by GIST. So, I mean, you're
good answer.
You're sitting where you're sitting where you want to be.
Cool. We have a couple more questions, and we have 10 minutes left, so we're going to try to usher in the remainder of the questions. Siva, you have a question. Do you want to go next?
Thank you. First, I want to congratulate Dave on this long journey of 25 years and educating the world about importance of meaning. Even though it is a common sense, but people are doing busy work, right, without focusing on understanding the meaning. So thanks for educating us. In that spirit, I was wondering, have you, I mean, by the way, I don't consider you retiring at all.
Nope.
People like that will not. So have you started working on the next version of data-centric architecture with the taking into account the Gen AI impact, the LLMs? Do you have a
Yeah.
updated,
Yep.
have you refactored your architecture?
A little bit, as I was sort of indicating, at the moment, we're probably using it more for finding triples and knowledge in unstructured text. I mean, it's very good at that, and adding some functionality onto our basic core. I think I might have mentioned the next book, which is called Real-Time Financial Accounting. I never really intended to write a book on accounting, but I found that I kind of had to, and Cheryl Dunn, my co-author, who's a professor of accounting, has kept me honest through this whole process. It's going to be out in November, and it, well, no, actually, we don't have very much Gen AI in that, but I think some people who read the early drafts said it's a nice case study on how to apply data-centric, which I think it is. I didn't intend for it to be, but that's kind of how it worked out. Is what happens when you stare at a domain that you think you know intimately, which I thought I did. 13 years at Arthur Andersen, implementing accounting systems and running a business and stuff. I thought I understood accounting, but turns out the harder you look, the less you know. And the long way around. Along with that launch, I'm supposed to do the second edition of both Software Wasteland and the Data-Centric Revolution, and I've just started those, and I'm trying to add in the impact of Gen AI into those, but I just haven't made as much progress as I hope to because of other conflicts. But thanks for the encouragement. I will get on it.
Thank you, Siva. We have another question from Brian Schultz. Many business leaders of small and medium-sized companies abhor doing enterprise IT in-house. They are adamant about buying versus building. So how does Think Big, Start Small help get past that?
Well, I think they're just going to have to wait. Somebody else is not going to abhor building, and they will get an edge. In the short term, eventually, somebody's going to read my latest book, create a package based on that. And here's what's weird right now about packaged software. Most packaged software is horizontal. It solves a business problem, and they try and solve it for as many industries as they possibly can. There's an HR system. Well, there's an HR system. There's an average company has 100 HR systems, everything from payroll to salary administration to benefits management to applicant tracking to there's 100 of them. And if you have, and then you have 100 accounting systems. I just recently read that the head of Goldman Sachs's financial reporting thing said that 800 spreadsheets went into the making of their financial report. And you go, God, it's not even 800 pages long. And and what? I hope something else went into it besides just 800 spreadsheets. But so at one point, having all those horizontal applications, yes, you can buy them all. You don't have to build, you can buy them. But you've just committed yourself to an amazing amount of integration. In fact, it's all integrated because they all have different models. So the point of the book is somebody's going to build some extremely vertically oriented packages, I suppose. But instead of getting one of each or dozens of each of the dozens of business functions, you're just going to get one for your business domain, and it's all going to be integrated. Now, when that occurs, yeah, there's something you can buy or rent, whatever. But up to then, you either have to decide you're going to do some building or you're going to do some integrating.
Dan Carey made a very good comment in regards to that question. He said one key part of the data-centric vision paradigm that is now beginning to have legs is low-code app development that natively uses RDF data. And we're doing some internal R&D with that. We're drinking our champagne. So care to talk a little bit about how that may be an enabler for accepting the building of things if it's in a shorter time span, if we have a pre-baked solution?
Yeah, this proposal I was working on over the weekend, I tried to characterize when you build a solution, you end up building n number of use cases, where n is some small positive number, hopefully small, but maybe a lot of applications have maybe 100 use cases. If you call every view and form and report or algorithm or whatever, if you call that a use case, some capability that is obvious and apparent, where you really want to get to, and I'm trying to make the case of going with what we're doing versus what they called for, which is a modified off the shelf. So this particular agency is hoping that somebody has a system kind of like what they want and they can just change it enough to suit their needs. But my contention in the proposal is firstly, changing an existing application, the cost of change has very little to do with the change. It has almost entirely to do with the thing you're trying to change. So if you take a simple change request and you put it up against an elegant system, it'll hardly take you any time at all. You put it up against some monstrosity that's horribly complex, and it'll take you forever. And I've seen this over and over and over again in client situations. So anyhow, we're railing against that and saying, on the other hand, even if you had to build all 100 of these from the ground up, they come in 3 categories. First one, I'm calling trivial. We can now automate anything that looks like a CRUD system. So, if you have 200 classes, like we suggest a lot of people do, and maybe 50 of them don't need a customized UI at all. Just the simple default thing. We just turn crank and we have those, all 100 of them, but 150 of them you throw out. The next category is typical, which is you're bringing data from multiple different classes, if you will, following various paths, putting it into one view, putting it into one form. You're combining data from multiple places. You've got drop-down lists and cross-field validation, all that kind of stuff. We're now to the point where those are on the order of a day or two to construct. There's no code. It's more a matter of design and trying it out. And then finally, yes, there's a few places you want to write code. If they take several weeks, so be it. If you only have a handful of them, your whole project is 0 for the trivial, n times 2 or 3 days for the typical, and n times 2 or 3 weeks. And hopefully that n is much smaller for the very bespoke things that you need to have. So anyhow, that's the economic model we're trying to shoot for. And I think, as people start to get used to that as an idea and start to stare at their own data and say, oh, I need a new function. I don't want to go buy an application. I just want to go have somebody build that function right on my graph. So
we have we're nearly at time. I think
Yep.
We still have a little bit of time. We can go through some of the other questions. This one I'd like to aim at Mark, since this is sort of in the bend of semantic operations. Ben Hales commented, complexity of maintenance of the semantic asset is what I have seen in our company as the biggest hurdle. And these days there are vendors out there that promise easier with YAML, with other things. So how can we get data engineers and process engineers convinced that the smartest way of maintaining a semantic layer is with the only way for maintaining a semantic layer good enough for AI is with knowledge graph technology?
Yeah, I've actually been chatting with Ben a little bit, but to me, one of the things, sometimes you got to stare at something, like stare in the mirror and be honest with yourself. So one of the things I suggested to him was, I did a webinar. It's actually 5 years old now, but again, this technology in some ways is somewhat timeless, I think, in its, in the way it was thought out, and that's why I think it's in some ways taken so long. But the idea was, have them honestly look at the implicit limitations in their in things like SQL and even YAML, JSON, the implicit limitations of the model. They were never explicitly designed to not have scalable identifiers, but they were kind of implicit. People weren't thinking about it, but the problem is they have identifiers that are not global. They don't have a good way of describing vocabulary and meaning. The cool thing about things like semantic knowledge graphs is the vocabulary and meaning is also described by use of these IRIs. And basically IRIs, right, are the things like URLs in your browser. So we know that the URL technology was created to work for the whole globe, right? Oracle can own their space and Semantic Arts can own their space, and we can talk about vocabulary and data and not get them mixed up. So the RDFL semantic stack was explicitly designed for global meaning and data representation and linking. And so I just think, I love what, I guess it was Michael Sullivan was talking about. If that's your core, you can, I think, and we espouse this too, you can put your core knowledge in that resource. It doesn't mean everything you do needs to be a query against the knowledge graph. Like he said, you can say, once I have my core knowledge, I could say extract a subgraph, put it in an LPG because they're way better at community detection or something like that. That's great. It's just, I think when you think about the real core technology, where do you want to put your information and where do you want that meaning to live and even outlive your applications? I think if you just look at the technologies, their implicit versus explicit design choices, I think, if you look in the mirror, you'll say, yeah, actually this RDFL thing was designed to be the best knowledge capture, the best context, and the best meaning, and the best way to even share stuff at a global reach without confusing who's talking about what. And I just think if you're honest with yourself, I don't know if they're if that would convince them, but to me, once you see that, I know we have people on board we work at Semantic Arts because we think, why would I work in any other technology? See, this just seems to make more sense. It seems to really let you capture what you want to capture in a richer way than most other technologies where you're leaving meaning in some app or in someone's head. I didn't get into the SemOps much, but to me, so SemOps, that's just something we've talked about. Semantic operations is like DevOps. It's DevOps for semantic systems. And the point is, DevOps is mature now. So, part of this complexity, what do you do about it? You do the same things you do in other SemOps. You have a lot of automation to build things. You may have automation to extract subgraphs into other representations where you need it. Certainly automated testing, integration testing, all that stuff. We are doing production scale with clients now because, while we love the technology, we think it's well thought out. We think it's universal. It's global scale. You still gotta have your stuff work, and you still want to make use of all the great advances we've made in rapid application deployment, continuous integration, things like that. So I can't go into it now, no time, but it definitely can be done, and we've done it at some Fortune 100 companies. It's running 24/7. It's very productionized, so you can get there.
Last question. I know we're all having a ton of fun, but then we'll start to wrap it up. We have John Resing asking, please elaborate on the platform of model-driven functions running on top of enterprise knowledge graph.
Yep. So back in the 90s, we were fortunate enough to stumble into a version of model-driven development. That one happened to be on an object-oriented database, but we worked through most of the problems. And conceptually, there is a program that reads a data description of each form and each view. and then interprets it, but its interpretation looks just like a handcrafted form or a view or those kinds of things that you'd normally find. And just a little bit of a description of a form looks a lot like a shackle file. It just says this shape has these fields, and these fields have these validations, and they have cardinality constraints, and things like that. There's not too much of a surprise to how that part goes together. Then the one piece, and in fact, we did this 10 years ago or so, but we kind of overdid it. We did it where you could only do model-driven development, and when you had to, because all of our constraint management and everything else was in the platform, the code, the single program that was generating all the UI, and realized we had to refactor that out and put a lot of the actual constraint management and entity resolution and IRI minting and all that kind of stuff in a server-side function, such that if you wrote some custom code, if you took some other platform like MetaFactory or just a bunch of code and decide you just wanted to write code directly against your graph, you still want it to funnel through a single place where you can provide equivalent constraint management and things like that. And that's, I think, the secret to be able to mix and matching bespoke code with model-driven code. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's what I got.
I think that closely landed on target. I had the question answered in my mind. So with that, I think we want to just thank the community for coming into the presentation. And Dave, Mark, any sign-offs?
I appreciate everyone taking their time and digging in. Thank you for coming and spending close to an hour and a half now with us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your last 25 years with us, some of you. There's some great names here on this list we've been dealing with for a long, long time, and hope to continue to do so. Join the community. Oh, I know one of the things I was going to think about. JT, do you have is our swag? I'm wearing my 25th anniversary shirt here. I think, is that available to the general public, or is it just us?
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
I will post a link in the chat right now. Stay tuned. We're working on getting decaf swag in there as well.
Oh, that's right.
Those that are attendees. We're close.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of a fun thing.
Yep.
Love
to see our logo out in the wild.
Yep. Cool. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
See you in 25 more years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everyone.
Thanks.